Hey everybody, this is Gary Matheny. Welcome to the Liberty Observatory, the YouTube channel that always keeps an eye on liberty. It is a sweet aroma. To be free on the outside and free on the inside is a foundation for a sweet life. You have to make your own choices, your own decisions, and you have to live with the consequences thereof. But guess what? When you're old, you get to sing the old Frank Sinatra song, I Did It My Way. And you have nobody else to blame for your mistakes, which is a good thing, because nobody really likes a bitter old person that's blaming all their problems on somebody else. Their parents, their job, their boss, their yada, 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 fill in the blank. You know, it's kind of like make your own choices and live with them. Maximize your freedom to make your choices and live with them. And at the end of the day, when you're an old person, maybe you can join in that Frank Sinatra song that I did it my way. Well, anyhow, thank you for joining me here today. Subscribe, like, share, etc., and etc. What I'd like to do today is go political on you. And what I'm going to propose is an immodest proposal. Russia versus the Ukraine. It's immodest because it's large. It's modest in some respects can mean small. But this is an immodest proposal because it's large, and it relates to the Russia v. Ukraine conflict and how we can address it from here in. First of all, it is August 2025, and just about a week or so ago, President Trump met with Putin in Alaska, and they got proposed meetings coming along here and there among the NATO allies, Zelensky, and there's going to be further discussions about whether there can be a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. And it's interesting, because I'm a lawyer, it's interesting to see how Trump has approached this from a negotiation standpoint. And basically, he is making an appeal to humanity. In other words, he just wants to save lives. And I don't think he's just being ingenuous about that. I think that he does want to save lives, and that's what he relies upon. He also is assuming the rule of a mediator. Now, I've been involved in many mediations, and a lot of lawyers mediate a lot during the course of their legal career. It is fairly typical that at a mediation, you get one party in one room, the other party in another room, and the mediator bounces back and forth to find a place where everybody can live. You know, what can you live with? And so when you have the parties in direct confrontation with each other, when emotions are running high, you tend not to succeed. But when you agree to mediation, you're saying that, hey, maybe we can work this out. And good mediators knows how to work both sides to compromise and arrive at a result that everyone can live with, thus avoiding a full-blown trial on the matter. So Trump is assuming the role of a mediator, and there's some people that have been upset with him because he's not an advocate for Ukraine. You know, Ukraine is our ally. At least I think it is. But at the end of the day, he's chosen a more neutral position to give him more credibility. Another thing, it's apparent to me that Trump really enjoys The Art of the Deal, his famous book, I think from the 1990s. He enjoys negotiations. He enjoys the conversation. And so not many political leaders enjoy the negotiation process. Most of them just want to get to the end result, and they want the end result that they like. And the negotiating process is painful, sometimes lasts too long. And you have a hard time getting to that point where everyone can live or find an agreement. But I think he really enjoys the negotiation process. And he may enjoy that more than the agreement. So we have a very unusual individual in Donald Trump, because I think he's just got that frame, that bent towards him, that he likes to negotiate. Well, during the course of all this, something has come up very important, but not talked about too much. And that is the rare metals agreement. Now, some people may say the precious metals agreement, however you calculate or term those metals. But Ukraine has a lot of natural resources, and we are tapping into their natural resources. I'm talking about the United States in exchange for military equipment, because in the prior administration, it just gave military equipment to Ukraine, but now there's an exchange, metals for military. And so that's a good thing for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons is slightly strategic. And that is that we now have, I'm talking about the United States now has a security interest in Ukraine, which might be the best thing that has happened to Ukraine in decades, years, maybe their entire existence. Because if we follow through on our security interest in Ukraine, we will not cut and run. So, what is being set up here is a possible win-win situation for Trump. On the one hand, if they have a peace accord, that's ultimately what he would desire. Have a peace accord, Russia withdraw their troops, some type of agreement relating to security between Russia and Ukraine, question of whether Crimea or other areas of Ukraine would be ceded to Russia, which is probably the largest question. What territory, if any, should be ceded to Russia? After all, Russia is winning the war and has conquered at least part of eastern Ukraine. Not advocating for that, I'm just talking about it. And so anyhow, if there is a peace accord, Trump looks great. What would never happen, but would be filled with so much irony, is that a nationalist like Donald Trump would get nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, where all these international prizes are ruled by globalists, internationalists, in other words, not nationalists like Donald Trump. So I can't imagine him getting the Nobel Peace Prize. But it would be nice if he did, if there was indeed peace. And I'm hoping for peace. I actually think that my personality is bent towards peace. But let's talk a minute here about what if there is no peace. We've got a security interest. Again, the United States has a security interest in Ukraine because of the precious or rare metals agreement. We can't cut and run on that. So what do we do if Russia and Ukraine do not have peace? How do we secure our security? How do we secure Ukraine's security because of that agreement? Well, one way to do it is build a military base in Ukraine, which would flip a lot of people out, but at the same time it's probably the most productive way to protect our security interests in Ukraine, our interest in these precious, our rare metals. So we've got an interest now to protect Ukraine's sovereignty, and it is a security interest. And that security interest can necessitate a military presence. And it benefits Trump in other ways, if you look at it from a pure political perspective, and that he can have this agreement, this treaty between Ukraine and the U.S., independent of NATO. So no matter how NATO fumbles through this, that, or the other, we can have this agreement with Ukraine, and it's between Ukraine and U.S., and NATO's basically on the sidelines like they usual are. And one of the most fun things about it, because a treaty has to be approved by the U.S. Senate, the fun thing about it is to watch the Democrat senators squirm over this issue, because they've spent the last decade saying all kinds of things like Russian, Trump collusion. Trump is a mere figurehead with Putin. He's he's being used by Putin. He basically is being manipulated by Putin. Putin is his big friend. He'll never take a stand against Putin, yada, 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 yada. And it goes on and on and on about how weak Trump is and how strong Putin is, and that Trump is no match for Putin. So here we have this hypothetical situation where a pro-Ukrainian treaty is asked to be ratified by the U.S. Senate, and we have all these Democrat senators who are trying to find reasons not to ratify the agreement, because they've all been so outspokenly pro-Ukrainian over the last 5 or 10 years. And so that would be a real interesting thing to see, as to how they are going to frustrate Trump by not approving the treaty, or are they going to be consistent with all their rhetoric and support such a treaty because they are so pro-Ukrainian. So, that is my immodest proposal. Russia v. Ukraine. Protect our interests in precious and rare metals in Ukraine. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.